katiba mtaani?
Polisi wanakushika. Wanasema, hey, hii nywele umeweka, wewe ni mungiki.
Read the constitution, know our rights, and make a good decision for us in our community.
We don't have to fight, elections go.
Watch KTN News round the clock on Signet Channel 32, DSTV Channel 274, GoTV Channel 94, Zuku Channel 14, and on Bamba TV Channel 2.
It's about being Kenyan. It's about Friday.
Thank you very much for staying with KTN News. My name is Betty Callow.
About winning, celebrating.
Protokiaro.
It's all about our language.
Chiropractor.
Not forgetting laughter and lots of fun.
MC Jesse and Betty Chalo will be right back on the Friday briefing.
Watch KTN News round the clock on Signet Channel 32, DSTV Channel 274, GoTV Channel 94, Zuku Channel 14, and on Bamba TV Channel 2.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to the program once again. I think this should be the final bit of our political show, that is the Sunday edition. And just before the break, we had the police boss, Japhet Kome, there making a statement with regards to the development in Mathare there, where 4 people have been confirmed dead following clashes there. But he clearly indicated that whatever happened in Mathare is not ethnic clashes, but he attributed it to, the normal crimes happening there. But he also mentioned that police have commenced investigations, and he has called on Kenyans not to get or engage into unnecessary panic. Husband, they also mentioned something to do with rent. Apparently, it seems the bone of contention is that the people who've refused to pay rent. But at the same time, he's saying that, investigations are going on. We've spoken to people in Mathare, and they're clearly saying that this is a violence that is politically instigated. It seems there are a lot of conflicting reports here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that is going on, and trying to cloud it with so many other issues of rent and all that is basically to veer off what it is. This is a lot more to do with politics, because you cannot talk about rent now. Why is it that they didn't deal with rent issues 3 months ago? Why now? So you have to be alive to the fact that even if it is rent coming on board, it is because there is a political environment that has created that kind of situation where even rent become an issue for people who used to live as neighbors. But I think I laud the police commissioner for taking a very withdrawn, less combative approach to all this. But again, the same problems that we've had. We cannot have senior police officers talk about we will. The probability of them doing anything constructive is anchored on what they've done in the past. And the past is in the recent past. We have Friday. We need to see action taken. We need to see police officers who are throwing stones. We need to see folks who infiltrated the NASA peaceful welcoming procession. We need to see NASA supporters who are involved in violent activities. And maybe if I come back to what Mark was talking about, these supporters and the people who infiltrate, the same way the police is approaching, is now speaking of approaching this as a service, you know, and not a force. I think it's also incumbent upon NASA and the NASA fraternity to ensure that within their people, within the supporters who believe there is some sort of policing, just to ensure that the processions are well defined, they know who they are. If there is any slight infiltration, they should easily identify those individuals. If there are some amongst them who take advantage, just like Kavemba was saying, there are people who leave the house knowing that there's going to be a procession, I need to join, and my main objective is to go home with something I've stolen. I think it is incumbent upon NASA and all these people who believe in the NASA cause to try and help have something that is peaceful.
Clearly, we have a lot to discuss, especially now that we are waiting for tomorrow's ruling from the Supreme Court. Kavemba, once again, you understand Nairobi politics. Briefly react to what Japhet Koome talked about in his briefing, talking about, you know, the violence there was caused by people who have failed to pay rent. Is that really the case from your own point of view?
You know, these things have just happened overnight and in the morning. So some of us are yet to get to know exactly what is happening. But I think the most important thing for the police service is to reaffirm the rule of law and to give everybody confidence that they are protected by the rule of law, that they are not going to look at any other thing other than the facts and evidence placed before them, so that they can isolate those who are breaking the law and protect those who are innocent. And that also extends to them. I have had my co-panelists talk about what they allege happened, and actually some of it was clear, like the issue of some of the police throwing stones. You know, I always want to go back to the Constitution because it is the only legal defense we have. You know, we have the Independent Police Oversight Authority. And the truth of the matter is that some of those things that are alleged or took place by the police fall under their mandate, such that everybody should operate under the law, including the police themselves. And we have a mechanism to check even the police themselves when they operate outside the law. So I think it's high time we go back to those institutions, like for instance, the Independent Police Oversight Authority should give a statement regarding all that, even regarding the issue of the demonstrations, whether people, the rights for people to demonstrate peacefully is being violated by the police, because I would think that also is part of their mandate. And once we do that, then everybody will be so conscious that the structure, the architecture of the Constitution is actually holding everybody accountable in a way that there cannot be continued illegalities that are not questioned. So that now we will be able, like the groups that co-panelist Bichachi is talking about, there are people who are going outside there because they are confident they have the protection of the Constitution and the law. It would be wrong for them to be victimized when they are going out there with well intentions and without any they are not out to cause any harm to anyone. So those ones need to be protected. There are those who are going to take advantage. Within the police force, there are those who are out to just do their job. And clearly, there are those who also are going out of their way to do things that ordinarily would not be expected of them. Who's on the right, protect them. Who's on the wrong, arrest them and hold them accountable. And that is for both citizens and the police. If we do that, then everybody will be clear that it is actually up to me to ensure that I am doing things within the law. For instance, they're talking about the issue of rent. If there is any issue of rent, of course, there is some, that means there are people who are breaking the law. Let them be dealt with individually. You cannot decide that everyone is guilty of that, because at the end of the day, we have agreements with our landlords as individuals. It's never communal. So if there are people who have in that, let those cases be isolated, let them be dealt with in accordance with the law. That way, everybody will be confident that we are actually a country that is governed by the rule of law. I think that is what is important, because it is getting to a point that it is getting confused. And the other thing that we need to also, we need to encourage is that let people stop taking the law into their own hands. If, for instance, my brother here steals from me, or I steal from him, and he openly tells me that, okay, you've stolen from me, I am not going to take you to the police, but I will deal with you. What does that mean? Because we are almost in such a situation as a country that there are problems, and we have decided we are not going to use the legally accepted means to deal with it. So silently, then what are you going to do? For instance, if he decides that he won't take me to the police, and he still is very clear that he'll have to do something, what does that mean? That will eventually mean lawlessness. And at the political setup in the country, that is where we are. That some people feel wronged, and they decided they are not going to pursue that through the constitutionally accepted means, but they will still pursue it. And if you look at it deeply and more honestly, that is what is starting to give rise to some of the things we are seeing. If all of us had, why ask yourself, why is it that before the 26th, there were no issues of people taking the law into their hands? Everybody had confined themselves to working within the institutions that are provided by the Constitution. But at some point, it became clear that some people decided, for their own good reasons, or for their not good reasons, for their own well-known reasons, that they will not. To me, they can't be good reasons, because at the end of the day, we are seeing what it is leading to. And that is why I always say that this constitution...
It's interesting how you've raised a question and then you've
yes,
answered it as well.
Anyway, so that I am clear about what I'm saying.
Yes, we're almost ending the program. And I think, Dismas, let's now be solution-oriented, okay? Tomorrow, of course, Kenya is expecting that final ruling from the Supreme Court of Kenya. It's a ruling that NASA, of course, they're not enjoined in any way. But at the same time, those who are saying that Raila and NASA are now focusing on something else. So from NASA's point of view, I'm not saying you should speak on their behalf, but as a political risk analyst, what do you think is the end game? I think Mark raised that question earlier. What do you think is the end game here?
Well, you don't need even to know Raila Odinga in any detail to understand what he's looking for. And as Esbon has indicated, the fact that he went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in a majority ruling said his votes have been stolen, that there is electoral injustice in Kenya. In my view, Raila Odinga is a happy man, because he's been complaining times above number that his victory has been compromised, and nobody believed in him. People said that this is a madman in the village, jumping all over, making all manner of claims. But now the Supreme Court has confirmed that, in fact, his victory has been compromised several times.
But the Supreme Court didn't say the votes were stolen, right?
Exactly.
I mean, again, these things...
They just said that there were illegalities, irregularities.
No, Yusuf, this is about logic.
Actually, when I started the question, I'd say, let's be solution-oriented.
Yes. You see, now you cannot
let's just have an honest conversation.
You can't get a solution without identifying the problem. So I'm trying to structure the problem. In logic, if you say A implies B, B implies C, therefore A implies C. So the Supreme Court indicated that, in fact, we have electoral injustice in Kenya. And his new thinking, if you look at his body language, he's indicated that this is the last time somebody is going to interfere with the voting process. This is the last time people are going to steal votes. So we are hoping that when he comes up with any solution, because he said he's going to make an announcement next week, whatever he wants to do is consistent with the Constitution, as Kavemba keeps on talking about, that we need to respect the Constitution. But if we respected the Constitution, we would not even be having this kind of conversation, because the Constitution has created an organization called IBC. And IBC, in my view, is the primary source of all the conflicts we have in Kenya. Because if IBC would have run an election consistent with the expectations of the Constitution and relevant legislation, then we wouldn't be where we are today. Because if you speak to Kenyans, majority of them believe that IBC, instead of creating the predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes, they have unpredictable systems, and the outcome is predictable. When we went for the election on 26th, everybody knew President Kenyatta was going to win. We didn't know by what margin. But we need to be in a place whereby an electoral body, when they pronounce somebody a winner, you take it to the bank. Like what happens in Israeli. You never hear that after an election with Netanyahu and the rest of the guys, people start complaining. A few days ago, there was an election in Britain. A few days ago, there was an election in Germany. People went in the morning to cast their ballots. In the afternoon, they were out watching the marathon. When are we going to have an IBC which is responsible for that? So now the solution is, in as much as our parliament doesn't seem to be working today because NASA is not now a capital offense, that if you play around with votes at a tallying center, if you are employed at IBC, if you are a third party rather, it should be considered like murder, that you go in. Because now we have penalties. People say that you, by either an act of omission or commission, there's going to be a penalty of maybe 10 million, 5 million.
Yes.
With the amount of money which has been grabbed in Kenya, there are so many politicians who can engage in this mischief and have 100 million on the ready to pay those fines.
Now that sounds like a long-term solution. You know, reforming an electoral body is not something that is going to take a very short period. But from what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, the end game will depend on what Raila Odinga is going to say maybe next week?
Yes, and again we go back, that in as much as Raila Odinga does not have a political office today, he's got so much political power. And in my view, and it doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says tomorrow, President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and Raila Odinga have to have a round-table conversation and discuss two issues. Number one, to clean up the electoral system. Number two, to discuss the issue of inclusivity. And for us to make progress, we need to have a referendum in the next 1 year where we ask ourselves, are we happy with the presidential system, or we are going to a parliamentary system?
Yes.
And this issue of inclusivity, how do you make every Kenyan feel that is Kenyan? For the people from Mathare who are watching Mr. Kwame addressing that news conference and claiming that this is no more crime, and he contradicts himself in the news conference. He says there are a number of politicians inciting people within Mathare. Then before he can even breathe, then he says, wait a minute, this is no more crime around rent. Now, do you think the people in Mathare consider Kwame as a servant of the people, that when he speaks, does he inspire confidence? The Inspector General of Police and his entire workforce, they should be blind to political party support, ethnicity, and station in life. For guys who are watching this news conference from upmarket homes in Lavington, for them they think Nairobi is the safest city. People will be coming from London.
I think you have delivered a point. Mark, are you foreseeing a situation where these two main protagonists might have some sort of a boardroom solution?
First and foremost, the problem is not Raila and Uhuru. The problem is Kenya. Kenya has a morality problem. When you talk about electoral malpractice, that is a morality issue. It is immoral for you to count 100 votes and say they are in Awasi, the poor person in Kiambu, the poor person wherever wants the same thing. They want a country where their children and them can dream and hope of a better future that has a defined path.
Yes.
That if I do the right thing, I can definitely become wealthy. Those are the three issues we need to deal with.
Fair enough. Hezbollah and Kavimbo, you have 2 minutes each. Hezbollah?
I think the first thing we need to appreciate is the fact that we live in a democracy, and the kind of democracy we lead in is where the power to lead is vested in a few leaders by the people who are led. And in as much as this is a Kenyan problem, I think the solution is in what Plato would call the philosopher king. That there are a number of Kenyans who believe in Raila Odinga and his intellectual enterprise. There are a number of Kenyans who believe in President Uhuru Kenyatta and his intellectual enterprise, and they believe that these people can offer direction and take this country forward. So for me, the end game is not what the Supreme Court will decide tomorrow. That is just one of the issues that we'll get a closure on. And irrespective of the verdict that they give, I don't think there is any cause for celebration, because it will not solve the fundamental issues that we have in this country as far as politics and electoral processes are concerned. And therefore, it will have to bring President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga into a round table, not to discuss issues about politics, but issues about Kenya and how then we can move forward.
This was talked about round table, Hezbollah as well. Are you alluding to some point of view?
Yeah, you know, depending on the ruling of the Supreme Court tomorrow, and assuming that they are going to uphold the victory of His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, then as the head of state and government, then it will be incumbent upon him to see how best to address whatever issues are being brought by the NASA team, and to ensure that all life is protected, all property is protected, and that Kenyans feel safe as they go about their business, because that will fall under his mandate as the president. And the worst would be to imagine that all is well and assume that we can just wish away whatever issues that are being brought. And the other thing is that let us, even those things need to be done within the law and the constitution. That way it will not spill over to what we are starting to see, people attacking each other and fighting each other and spilling blood. I think that to me is the main concern. My all-time favorite politician, the former president Kibaki, used to tell us that no one is going anywhere. And I would want to repeat those sentiments, that this Kenya belongs to all of us. No one is here by accident, and no one is going anywhere. So you can imagine one of our neighbors in Rwanda, in 1994, a group decided to exterminate another group, and it never happened. And we shouldn't even think it can happen anyway. I don't think there is a group that has ever succeeded in